The surgical theater at Redwood General Hospital erupted into chaos at 2:47 a.m. Blood sprayed across the pale blue drapes as Dr. Vincent Harlow, the hospital's lead cardiac surgeon, stumbled backward from the operating table, his gloved hands trembling. "I'm losing him," he said, voice cracking. "We're losing him." The monitors screamed their flatline chorus. Nurses froze. An anesthesiologist called time of death once, then twice, as protocol demanded. Everyone knew what came next. The quiet defeat. The paperwork. The family waiting in the hallway about to have their world shattered. Then a figure nobody had noticed slipped forward from the shadows near the wall. Thin, unremarkable, wearing scrubs 2 sizes too big. She didn't ask permission. Her hands moved, fast, precise, brutal, chest compressions that cracked ribs, a manual pulse check, then a scalpel she shouldn't have touched. 40 seconds. That's all it took. The monitors beeped. Once. Twice. A rhythm returned. The dying man gasped. Dr. Harlow stared at her like she'd just raised the dead. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She was already gone. Upstairs in a locked office, a phone rang. A federal agent answered, listened, then went pale. "Find her," he said quietly. "Find her now. That woman doesn't exist." Before we go any further, if you want to see how this story ends, how the truth explodes and justice finally strikes back, stay with me until the very last word. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels, and let's dive in. Because what happens next? Nobody sees it coming. The emergency room at Redwood General never slept, but it had rhythms. Quiet spells between midnight and 3. Bursts of violence around bar closing time. The low hum of fluorescent lights and the shuffle of worn-out residents dragging themselves through another shift. Dr. Lana Carter had learned those rhythms in 6 months, the way you learn the breathing of someone sleeping next to you. She knew when to stay invisible. She knew when to move. Tonight, she was supposed to stay invisible. "Carter, grab me a suture kit, the blue one." That was Dr. Monica Reeves, third-year surgical resident, standing over a drunk kid with a gash across his forehead. She didn't look at Lena when she said it. Nobody did. Lena was furniture, useful when needed, forgotten otherwise. She fetched the kit, set it on the tray, stepped back. Reeves didn't say thank you. She never did. Lena returned to her corner near the supply cabinets, arms crossed, watching. Always watching. The ER attending tonight was Dr. Peter Garrison, a man who wore his reputation like cologne. Too much of it, too obvious. He strutted between gurneys, barking orders, making sure everyone knew he was in charge. He had that look some doctors got after a decade in the field, the one that said they'd stopped caring about patients and started caring about how they looked, caring about patients. "Carter," Garrison snapped from across the room. "Coffee, black, don't screw it up." She didn't move immediately, just a beat. Long enough for him to notice, short enough that he couldn't call it defiance. Then she walked toward the break room, her steps measured, her face blank. Behind her, she heard Reeves laugh. "God, she's like a ghost. Does she even talk?" Garrison's voice followed. "If she did, I wouldn't listen." The break room was empty. Lena poured the coffee, stared at the steam rising from the cup. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. That was the problem. People noticed steadiness in a place built on panic. It made them uneasy, made them wonder. She'd learned to temper it, to fumble a little, to hesitate when she shouldn't, to make herself smaller than she was. But it was exhausting, this constant performance of mediocrity. She brought Garrison his coffee. He took it without looking at her. "You're still here. Thought your shift ended an hour ago." "It did." "Then why are you still in my ER?" "Covering for Dr. Patel. He called in sick." Garrison's eyes flicked to her, annoyed. "Nobody asked you to cover. Nobody else was available. Next time, ask first." He turned away, dismissing her with his shoulder. Lena returned to her corner. The drunk kid was stitched up now, mumbling about his ex-girlfriend. Reeves peeled off her gloves, tossed them in the bin, and checked her phone. Another quiet night at Redwood General. Another shift where nothing mattered, except it wasn't quiet. Not really. Lena had felt it for the past hour, the tension building in the air like pressure before a storm. The paramedics had been too busy. 3 ambulances in 40 minutes, all trauma, all barely stable. A car wreck on the interstate, a stabbing outside a nightclub, a construction accident that left a man with a steel rod through his shoulder. The ER was holding, but just barely. And now the trauma bay was full. No beds, no breathing room. When the doors burst open at 3:15 a.m., nobody was ready. Incoming! GSW to the chest, unresponsive, BP crashing. The paramedics wheeled in a gurney moving too fast. A young man sprawled across it, his shirt soaked black with blood. His eyes were open but vacant, his breath coming in wet, shallow gasps. Garrison moved immediately, his coffee forgotten. Reeves followed. Nurses swarmed. Get him to Bay 3. Hang 2 units, type and cross for 6 more. Someone page Harlow. Wait, where the hell is Harlow? Surgery, a nurse said. He's got the governor on the table. Garrison's face went tight. Then we handle it. Reeves, with me. Carter. He paused, his eyes landing on her like she was a last resort he didn't want to use. Assist, and stay out of the way. Lena followed them into the trauma bay. The young man was maybe 22, Hispanic, tattoos on his forearms, a gold chain tangled in the blood on his neck. His chest rose and fell in erratic spasms. Garrison cut away his shirt, revealing the entry wound just below the left clavicle. No exit. The bullet was still inside. Damn it, Garrison muttered. It's close to the subclavian. If it nicked the artery, Reeves, get a chest tube in. Carter, hold pressure here. Lena moved without hesitation, her hands finding the wound, pressing down with the exact amount of force needed. Not too much, not too little. The young man's eyes rolled toward her, unfocused, terrified. She met his gaze from, "You're going to be okay," she said quietly. "Stay with me." Garrison didn't hear her. He was too busy shouting orders, his hands moving fast but not smooth. He was good, Lena knew, but he was rattled. The chaos was getting to him. Reeves inserted the chest tube, blood and air hissing out. The monitor beeped erratically, BP dropping, heart rate spiking. "He's decompensating," Reeves said, her voice edging toward panic. "I can see that." Garrison's jaw was tight. He reached for the ultrasound probe, pressed it against the young man's chest. The screen flickered, fluid in the pericardium. Cardiac tamponade. The blood was crushing his heart. "We need to drain it," Lena said. Garrison shot her a look. "I didn't ask for your opinion. You need to drain it now or he's going to arrest." "Carter, I swear to God." The monitor flatlined. For a second, nobody moved. Then Garrison lunged forward, starting compressions, his hand slamming down on the young man's sternum. "Reeves! Epi! Now!" Reeves fumbled with the syringe. Lena stepped back, her hand still covered in blood, watching. 30 seconds. A minute. The young man wasn't coming back. Garrison was doing everything right, but it wasn't enough. The blood in the pericardium was still there. Still squeezing, still killing. "Let me try," Lena said. "Get out." "Let me try." Garrison looked up, his face red, sweat dripping from his temples. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Lena didn't answer. She moved, fast. She grabbed a spinal needle from the crash cart, didn't wait for permission, positioned it just below the xiphoid process, angled upward. The room went silent. Reeves's mouth fell open. Garrison started to shout, but Lena was already in, piercing the pericardium, drawing back the plunger. Dark blood filled the syringe, 20 milliliters, 30. The pressure released. The monitor beeped. Once, twice. A rhythm. The young man gasped, his eyes snapping open. Garrison stared at her, his face white. "What did you just—" "Pericardiocentesis," Lena said, her voice flat. "He had tamponade. You were compressing a heart that couldn't fill." Nobody spoke. The young man coughed, blood on his lips, but alive. The nurses exchanged glances. Reeves looked like she'd just seen a magic trick she couldn't explain. Garrison's hands were still hovering over the young man's chest, useless now. "Get him to surgery," Lena said quietly. "He's stable, but he won't stay that way. The bullet's still in there." Garrison's voice came out low, dangerous. "Get out of my ER." Lena met his eyes. No fear, no defiance, just exhaustion. She stripped off her gloves, dropped them in the bin, and walked out. Behind her, she heard Reeves whisper, "Did she just—" "Shut up," Garrison said. Lena didn't go far. She sat in the stairwell, her back against the cold concrete wall, her hands resting on her knees. They weren't shaking. They never shook. That was the problem. That was always the problem. She closed her eyes, let the silence settle. Somewhere above her, Dr. Vincent Harlow was operating on Governor Alan Pritchard, a man whose face she'd seen on the news 100 times. Redwood General had been buzzing for weeks about it, the governor choosing their hospital, the media attention, the pressure. Harlow had been prepping for days. It was supposed to be a routine cardiac bypass, simple, clean, a political win for the hospital. But Lena knew better. Nothing was ever simple. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Jansen, the night shift supervisor. "You still here?" "Yeah." "Go home. You've been on for 16 hours. "I'm fine." "That's an order, Carter." She didn't respond. She shoved the phone back in her pocket, stood, stretched. Her back ached, her feet hurt. She should go home. She should sleep. But she wouldn't. She never did. Sleep was where the memories lived, and she'd spent 6 months running from those. She climbed the stairs instead, heading toward the surgical wing. She told herself it was just to check on the GSW patient, to make sure he'd made it to the OR. But that was a lie. She wanted to see Harlow, wanted to see the man everyone said was the best, wanted to see if he was really that good, or if he was just another Garrison, loud, arrogant, coasting on reputation. The observation gallery above OR2 was dark, empty. Lena slipped inside, stood at the window, looked down. Harlow was there, gowned and gloved, his hands moving inside Governor Pritchard's chest. The surgical team around him moved like a machine, precise, coordinated, efficient. Lena watched the monitors, the vital signs, the rhythm of the operation. Everything looked stable. Harlow was good. She could see it in the way he handled the tissue, the way he anticipated the bleeders, the way he stayed 2 steps ahead. Then something changed. It was subtle. A shift in Harlow's posture, a hesitation. His hands slowed. One of the nurses glanced at the monitor, frowned. Lena leaned closer to the glass. The governor's BP was dropping, not fast, but steady. Harlow was saying something, his voice muffled through the glass, but Lena could see his face. He looked confused, worried. One of the residents moved in, adjusting the retractor. Harlow waved him off, tried to reposition, but his hands were shaking now. Barely noticeable, but there. The anesthesiologist spoke. Lena couldn't hear the words, but she saw the urgency in his body language. The BP kept dropping. The heart rate was climbing. Harlow stepped back, just for a second. But in surgery, a second was everything. Lena's breath caught. She knew that look. She'd seen it before, in other surgeons, in other operating rooms. It was the look of a man realizing he was in over his head. The look of someone who'd just lost control. The door to the gallery opened behind her. Lena turned. Dr. Monica Reeves stood there, still in her scrubs, her face flushed. "What are you doing here?" "Watching." "You're not supposed to be here." "I'm not supposed to be a lot of places." Reeves walked to the window, looked down. Her expression shifted immediately. "What's wrong with Harlow?" "He's stuck." "Stuck how?" Lena didn't answer. She was already moving out of the gallery, down the hall, toward the OR. Reeves called after her, but she didn't stop. She pushed through the double doors into the surgical suite, and a nurse immediately intercepted her. "Dr. Carter, you can't— Is he bleeding out?" The nurse hesitated. "We're trying to— Yes or no?" "Yes." Lena walked past her, into OR2. The room was controlled chaos. Harlow was back at the table now, his hands inside the governor's chest, but his movements were desperate, uncoordinated. Blood pooled in the cavity. The suction couldn't keep up. The anesthesiologist's voice was tight. "BP's at 70/40. He's crashing." Harlow's voice cracked. "I can't see the bleeder. There's too much blood. I can't—" "Let me in," Lena said. Every head in the room turned. Harlow looked up, his eyes wide behind his surgical loops. "What?" "Let me in. I can find it." "You're a first year. You don't even—" "I can find it." Harlow's hands were still in the chest, but they'd stopped moving. The monitor alarm screamed. The governor was dying. Harlow knew it. Everyone knew it. He looked at Lena, and for a moment she saw the decision forming in his eyes, the pride fighting the panic. Then the panic won. Fine. Scrub in. Fast. Lena was at the sink in 30 seconds, hands moving through the motions she'd done 1,000 times. Gloves, gown. She stepped to the table and Harlow shifted aside, giving her room. She didn't hesitate. Her hands went into the chest, feeling, searching. The blood was hot, slick, everywhere. But she didn't need to see. She needed to feel. Her fingers found the aorta, traced it down, found the bypass graft Harlow had just placed. There. A small tear in the anastomosis. Maybe 2 millimeters. Invisible under the blood. But it was there. Suture. 50 proline. The scrub nurse handed it to her. Lena's hands moved. Fast, smooth, precise. 3 stitches. 4. The tear closed. The bleeding stopped. The blood cleared. The governor's BP stabilized. Harlow stared at her. How did you... The graft was under tension. You pulled it too tight on the proximal end. His face went red. I didn't... You did. It's fixed now. She stepped back, stripped off her gloves. The room was silent. The anesthesiologist checked the monitors, then nodded slowly. He's stable. Harlow didn't say anything. He just stood there, his hand still hovering over the governor's chest, useless again. Lena walked out of the OR, back into the hallway, her heart pounding now, adrenaline finally catching up. Reeves was waiting outside, her eyes wide. Did you just save the governor? Lena didn't answer. She kept walking, but she could feel it, the shift, the way people were looking at her now, the way the whispers would start. She'd been invisible for 6 months, and in one night, she'd broken the rules she'd set for herself. Don't be seen. Too late now. She made it to the locker room before her hands started shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the weight of pretending to be someone she wasn't. She sat on the bench, her head in her hands, and let herself breathe. Just breathe. The door opened. Dr. Garrison walked in, his face hard. We need to talk. Not now. Yes, now. He sat across from her, his arms crossed. What you did tonight, both times, that wasn't protocol. That wasn't your place. They were dying. That's not the point. Then what is? Garrison leaned forward, his voice low. The point is, you're a first-year resident with a thin resume and no references. You showed up here 6 months ago out of nowhere, and now you're pulling procedures out of your ass that most attendings couldn't do. So I'll ask you one more time. Who the hell are you? Lena met his eyes. I'm nobody. Bullshit. I'm nobody, she repeated, her voice flat. And if you're smart, you'll leave it at that. Garrison stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, shook his head. You're going to get yourself fired. Or worse. He left. Lena sat there alone, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She knew he was right. She knew this couldn't last. But she also knew she didn't have anywhere else to go. This was it. Redwood General. Phoenix. A life built on a lie. She changed out of her scrubs, pulled on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed her bag. It was almost 5 a.m. The sun would be up soon. She walked out through the ER, past the nurse's station, past the trauma bays. The GSW patient was out of surgery now, stable, in the ICU. The drunk kid with the stitched forehead was gone. The night shift was ending. A new day was starting. Lena pushed through the front doors into the cool desert air. The parking lot was half empty. Her car, a beat-up Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, was parked in the far corner under a broken streetlight. She walked toward it, her footsteps echoing on the asphalt. Then she heard the voice. Dr. Carter. She stopped, turned. A man stood near the entrance, half in shadow, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit. He didn't look like a doctor. He didn't look like hospital administration. He looked like someone who asked questions for a living. Who are you? Lena asked. The man stepped into the light. His face was unremarkable, clean-shaven, mid-40s, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. But his eyes weren't. They were sharp, calculating. Special Agent Marcus Wilder, FBI. Lena's chest tightened. What do you want? Just to talk. I don't have anything to say. I think you do. Wilder pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, held it up. A photo. Lena's face. Younger, thinner, hair pulled back. Military fatigues, captain's bars on her collar. Her breath stopped. "That's not me," she said. "Sure it is. Captain Lena Carter, combat trauma surgeon, 2 tours in Iraq, Silver Star, and a court-martial that ended your career." He lowered the phone, his expression unreadable. "So I'll ask you again. What are you doing here?" Lena didn't move, didn't speak. Her mind was racing, calculating, searching for an exit, but there wasn't one. Not this time. Wilder stepped closer. "The governor's still under anesthesia, but he's been talking, mumbling, really. Said something interesting. Said he knows you. Said you saved his son. Back in 2003. Fallujah." Lena's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yeah, you do. And in about 4 hours, when the governor wakes up, he's going to remember. And when he does, this whole thing is going to explode." Wilder tilted his head. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me. We're going to have a conversation, and you're going to tell me the truth. And if I don't, then I arrest you for identity fraud, practicing medicine under false credentials, and whatever else I can think of on the drive to the federal building." He paused. "Or you can talk. Your choice." Lena looked at him, at the phone in his hand, at the parking lot stretching empty behind her. She thought about running, thought about disappearing again, but she was tired, so tired. "Fine," she said quietly. "Let's talk." Wilder nodded, gestured toward a black SUV parked near the entrance. Lena walked toward it, her legs heavy, her heart pounding. As she reached for the door, she glanced back at the hospital. The lights were still on. The ER doors were still open. Somewhere inside, people were still dying, still being saved, still living out the chaos she'd left behind. She climbed into the SUV. Wilder got in beside her. The engine started, and as they pulled out of the parking lot, Lena closed her eyes and let the truth, her truth, finally start to surface. Because after 6 months of hiding, after 6 months of being nobody, the past had just walked back into her life. And it wasn't letting go. The SUV smelled like coffee and leather, the kind of vehicle that had seen too many early mornings and late-night stakeouts. Wilder didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. He just drove, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror like he expected someone to follow. Lena sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the desert landscape rolling past. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that felt too beautiful for the situation she was in. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." Wilder's voice was calm, professional, the tone of someone who'd done this 100 times. He turned off the main road onto a smaller highway heading east, away from the city. The traffic thinned, the buildings disappeared. Just desert now, stretching flat and endless under the brightening sky. Lena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. 3 missed calls from the hospital, 2 texts from Dr. Jansen. "Where are you? Chief wants to see you ASAP." She turned the phone off, shoved it back in her pocket. Whatever was waiting for her at Redwood General, it could wait. Right now she had bigger problems. "You're not under arrest," Wilder said, breaking the silence. "Not yet. But I need you to understand something. The governor of Arizona is lying in a hospital bed right now because you saved his life. Twice, if what I've been told is accurate. That makes you valuable, but it also makes you dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "Because you're not supposed to exist. Dr. Lena Carter, the one on your hospital badge, has a medical degree from a school in the Caribbean, a resume so thin it's practically transparent, and 0 verifiable history before 6 months ago. That's a ghost, not a person, and ghosts make people nervous." Lena stared out the window. "So what do you want from me?" "The truth, all of it, starting with Fallujah." She didn't answer. Wilder glanced at her, his expression unreadable. The governor's son was Lieutenant Daniel Pritchard, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. His convoy hit an IED outside the city in October 2003. 3 dead, 2 wounded. Daniel took shrapnel to the abdomen and chest. He was bleeding out when a trauma surgeon pulled him off a medevac chopper and operated on him in the back of a Humvee. No OR, no proper equipment, just hands and willpower. That surgeon saved his life. Lena's jaw tightened. She remembered that day. Remembered the heat, the dust, the screaming. Remembered Daniel Pritchard's face, pale, terrified, begging her not to let him die. She'd told him the same thing she'd told the GSW patient tonight. "You're going to be okay. Stay with me." And he had. The governor never forgot, Wilder continued. He's been looking for that surgeon ever since. Wanted to thank them, but the military records were sealed, classified. He couldn't get a name, until tonight, when he woke up mid-surgery and saw your face. He was under anesthesia. People say crazy things under anesthesia. Sure, but he wasn't wrong, was he? Lena didn't respond. Wilder pulled off the highway onto a dirt access road leading toward a cluster of low hills. In the distance, a small airstrip came into view, a single runway, a rusted hangar, a few parked planes that looked like they hadn't flown in years. He stopped the SUV near the hangar, killed the engine. The silence outside was absolute. No cars, no people. Just the wind and the heat already starting to build. Wilder turned to face her. Captain Lena Carter, born in Portland, Oregon, joined the Army at 19, medical school at Uniformed Services University, deployed to Iraq in 2002, saved 43 lives in 18 months, received a Silver Star for pulling a wounded Marine out of a burning vehicle under enemy fire. And then, in December 2003, you disobeyed a direct order during a mass casualty event. You stayed behind to finish a surgery when you were ordered to evacuate. 3 soldiers died because the medevac couldn't take off without you. You were court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, and stripped of your medical license. Lena's hands curled into fists in her lap. You read a file. Congratulations. I read a file that says you haven't existed for the past 22 years. No employment, no address, no digital footprint. You vanished. Until 6 months ago, when a woman with your face and a fake resume showed up at a hospital in Phoenix. He leaned forward slightly. So I'll ask you again, what are you doing here? She met his eyes. I'm trying to save lives. That's all I've ever done. Even when it costs you everything? Especially then. Wilder studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, let's say I believe you. Let's say you're not here to cause trouble. That still leaves the problem of the governor. He's going to wake up fully in a few hours, and when he does, he's going to start asking questions. And when those questions reach the hospital administration, they're going to dig. They're going to find out that Dr. Lena Carter doesn't exist. And then what? Then I disappear again. You think that's going to work twice? It has to. Wilder shook his head. No, it doesn't, because this time you've got federal attention. You've got a governor who owes you his life, and you've got me. He pulled a folder from the back seat, dropped it in her lap. Lena opened it. Inside were photos, surveillance shots of her entering and leaving Redwood General, timestamps, notes. Her stomach turned. How long have you been watching me? 3 weeks, ever since a flagged identity popped up in the hospital's hiring system. The agency runs algorithms on medical licenses, looking for fraudulent credentials. Yours pinged. I was assigned to investigate. He gestured at the folder. I've been trying to figure out if you're a threat or just someone trying to stay off the grid. Tonight answered that question. So what now? You arrest me? No, I give you a choice. Wilder's voice softened slightly. The governor is going to remember you. He's going to want answers. You can either run and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, or you can stay and let me help you. Help me how? By clearing your name. Lena laughed, a bitter sound. You can't clear a dishonorable discharge. Maybe not, but I can make sure the truth comes out. What really happened that day in Iraq. Why you stayed behind, why those soldiers died. He paused. And why you were punished for saving a life instead of being honored for it. She stared at him. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me. Lena looked away out at the empty desert. For 6 months, she'd kept it buried. The memories, the guilt, the anger. She told herself it was easier that way, safer. But sitting here now, with Wilder's eyes on her and the sun climbing higher in the sky, she felt the weight of it pressing down, suffocating. There were 12 casualties, she said quietly. A suicide bomber hit a marketplace. We were the closest unit with a medic. I was operating out of a field hospital, just tents and tables. The wounded kept coming, too many, too fast. I was in the middle of a surgery when the order came through. Evacuate immediately. Hostile forces moving toward our position. We had maybe 10 minutes. Wilder didn't interrupt. He just listened. I had a Marine on my table, 19 years old, shrapnel in his liver. If I stopped, he'd bleed out in minutes, so I didn't stop. I told the evac team to go without me. I'd finish and catch the next bird. Her voice cracked slightly. But there was no next bird. The hostiles hit us before I could get out. 3 soldiers were killed trying to hold the perimeter while I finished the surgery. I saved the Marine, but I killed 3 others doing it. That wasn't your fault. The Army disagreed. The Army was wrong. Lena's head snapped toward him. You weren't there. You don't get to say that. You're right. I wasn't there. But I've read enough reports to know that command screwed up. They sent you into an unsecured zone with inadequate support and then blamed you when things went sideways. That's not justice. That's politics. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. It matters if you want to stop running. Lena closed the folder, shoved it back at him. I'm not interested in redemption. I just want to do my job. Then do it legally. Let me help you get your license back. Your real one. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Wilder's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening. That's the hospital. The governor's awake. He looked at her. You've got about an hour before this whole thing blows wide open. So decide now. Run or trust me. Lena sat in silence, the desert heat seeping through the windows, her heart pounding in her chest. Trust. The word felt foreign, dangerous. She hadn't trusted anyone in 22 years. Trusting people got you court-martialed, got you erased. But sitting here staring at Wilder's calm, steady face, she realized she didn't have a choice. Not really. Fine, she said. I'll stay. But if this goes wrong, it won't. You don't know that. No, but I'm good at my job. He started the engine, turned the SUV back toward the highway. And so are you. That's why we're going to fix this. They drove in silence for a while, the city reappearing on the horizon. Lena's mind was racing, running through scenarios, calculating risks. She'd spent 6 months invisible, and now she was about to step directly into the spotlight. Everything she'd built, the fake identity, the quiet life, the chance to practice medicine again, was about to collapse. But maybe, just maybe, something better could rise from the wreckage. Wilder's phone rang. He answered, listened, his jaw tightening. Understood. We're 10 minutes out. He hung up, glanced at Lena. The governor's asking for you. By name. Lena Carter or Captain Carter? Both. Her stomach dropped. That's not good. No, but it's happening. The hospital chief of staff is in his room right now, along with 2 federal agents from my office. They want answers. What do I tell them? The truth. Or as much of it as you're comfortable sharing, but don't lie. They'll know. Lena's hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against her thighs, forced herself to breathe. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can. You've been doing it your whole life. Just this time you're not doing it alone. They pulled into the hospital parking lot 15 minutes later. The morning shift had started, the lot filling with cars, doctors, and nurses streaming through the entrance. Lena climbed out of the SUV, her legs heavy, her chest tight. Wilder walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on her elbow, not restraining, just steadying. Inside, the hospital felt different. The usual chaos was muted, replaced by a tension that hung in the air like static. Nurses whispered at the station. Security guards stood near the elevators. Everyone knew something was happening. They just didn't know what. Wilder led her to the executive wing on the 4th floor, a place she'd never been. The hallways here were quieter, carpeted, lined with offices instead of patient rooms. He stopped outside a conference room, knocked once, then pushed the door open. Governor Alan Pritchard sat at the head of the table, still in a hospital gown, an IV line taped to his arm. He looked pale, exhausted, but his eyes were sharp. Beside him sat Dr. Harrison Caldwell, the hospital's chief of staff, a silver-haired man in his 60s with the kind of face that had spent decades in boardrooms. 2 other agents stood near the window, arms crossed, watching. Caldwell stood immediately. Dr. Carter, please, sit. Lena didn't move, her eyes locked on the governor. He was staring at her, his expression unreadable. Captain Carter, he said quietly. I knew I wasn't dreaming. Caldwell's head snapped toward him. Captain? Pritchard nodded slowly. Iraq, 2003. She saved my son's life. He looked at Lena. I never got to thank you. Lena's throat tightened. You don't need to. Yes, I do. Daniel is alive because of you. He's a father now. 2 kids. He talks about you every Veterans Day. The surgeon who wouldn't let him die. Pritchard's voice wavered slightly. I've been looking for you for 22 years. Caldwell's face had gone white. Governor, I don't understand. Dr. Carter's credentials show... Her credentials are fake, Wilder interrupted, stepping forward. But her skills aren't. Captain Lena Carter was one of the best trauma surgeons in the U.S. military. She saved 43 lives in Iraq. She was decorated. And then she was dishonorably discharged for refusing to leave a dying Marine behind. Caldwell sat down heavily. This is impossible. We vetted her. You vetted a ghost, Wilder said, because that's what she's been for 2 decades, and now we're here to fix it. One of the other agents spoke up. With all due respect, Agent Wilder, this woman has been practicing medicine under false pretenses. That's a federal crime. It's also the only reason the governor is alive right now, Wilder shot back. So maybe we focus on the fact that she saved his life instead of the paperwork. The room fell silent. Caldwell looked at Lena, his expression somewhere between shock and anger. Is this true? All of it? Lena nodded. Yes. Why didn't you just apply under your real name? Because I don't have a license. The dishonorable discharge stripped it. Then you shouldn't be practicing at all. I know. Her voice was steady, unflinching. But people were dying, and I could help, so I did. Caldwell stood, paced to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Do you have any idea what this means for the hospital? The liability? The lawsuits? If this gets out... It's already out, Pritchard said quietly. I know, and I'm not going to let you bury her for it. Caldwell turned. Governor, with all due respect, no, you listen to me. Pritchard's voice was soft but carried the weight of authority. This woman saved my life last night. She saved my son 22 years ago, and from what I've been told, she's saved dozens of others since she's been here. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to work with Agent Wilder to get her license restored. You're going to clear her record, and you're going to make sure she can keep doing what she does best. I can't just... Yes, you can, because if you don't, I'll make one phone call, and every major news outlet in the country will know that Redwood General tried to fire the surgeon who saved the governor's life. How do you think that's going to play? Caldwell's jaw tightened. He looked at Lena, then at Wilder, then back at the governor. This is irregular. Most good things are. Caldwell exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging. Fine. I'll make the calls, but this is going to take time. Weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, Dr. Carter, or Captain Carter, cannot practice here, not until this is resolved. Lena felt the floor drop out from under her. You're suspending me. I'm protecting the hospital. And you. I don't need protection. I need to work. That's not an option right now. Caldwell's voice was firm. You'll remain on administrative leave, with pay, until we sort this out. That's the best I can do. Lena's hands curled into fists. She wanted to argue, to fight, but she could see it in Caldwell's face. This wasn't negotiable. She looked at Wilder. He gave her a small nod. Let it go, for now. Fine, she said quietly. Pritchard stood, wincing slightly as the IV tugged at his arm. Captain, I know this isn't what you wanted, but I promise you, we're going to make this right. You have my word. Lena met his eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that after 22 years, justice was finally within reach. But she'd learned a long time ago that promises didn't mean much, especially from people in power. Thank you, Governor, she said, her voice flat. The meeting ended. Wilder walked her out, through the hallways, back toward the elevators. Lena felt numb, disconnected, like she was watching herself from a distance. Suspended. The word echoed in her mind. After everything she'd done, all the lives she'd saved, she was being sidelined again. This is temporary, Wilder said as they reached the parking lot. Caldwell's covering his ass, but Pritchard's serious. He's got pull. We can make this work. And in the meantime, I do what? Sit at home and wait? You trust the process. I don't trust anything. Wilder stopped, turned to face her. I know. But you trusted me enough to stay, so keep trusting, just a little longer. Lena looked away, her jaw tight. She wanted to scream, to punch something, to run. But she didn't. She just stood there, the morning sun beating down, the hospital looming behind her like a monument to everything she'd lost. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out. A text from Dr. Reeves. What the hell is going on? Garrison's telling everyone you're suspended. True? Lena didn't reply. She shoved the phone back in her pocket, looked at Wilder. I need to go. Where? Anywhere but here. He didn't stop her. She walked to her car, climbed in, started the engine. Her hands were shaking again, but this time she didn't try to stop them. She just drove, out of the parking lot, onto the highway, heading nowhere in particular. The city blurred past. The desert stretched endlessly ahead. She thought about running again, about disappearing. It would be easy. She'd done it before. But something held her back. Maybe it was Pritchard's promise. Maybe it was Wilder's certainty. Or maybe it was just exhaustion, the kind that comes from running for so long that you forget what you're running toward. Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her. She pulled over, parked on the shoulder, picked up. Captain Carter? The voice was unfamiliar, male, formal. Who is this? Colonel Raymond Hastings, U.S. Army Medical Command. Lena's breath caught. How did you get this number? Agent Wilder gave it to me. He said you might be willing to talk. About what? About coming back. The words didn't make sense. Lena stared out at the desert, her mind struggling to process. Coming back where? To the Army, to medicine. We've been reviewing your case, Captain. What happened in Fallujah, the court-martial, the discharge. And we believe there may have been procedural errors. Procedural errors. Her voice was hollow. Yes. Errors that, if corrected, could result in your discharge being overturned. Your rank restored, your license reinstated. Lena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Why now? Why after 22 years? Because the governor of Arizona called the Secretary of Defense this morning and told him that one of the finest surgeons he'd ever seen was being punished for doing her job. And the secretary doesn't like being told his house isn't in order. Hastings paused. We'd like you to come to Washington, review the records, see if we can make this right. And if I say no? Then nothing changes. You stay suspended. You keep running. But if you say yes... He let the sentence hang. Lena closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Washington. The Army. Her old life. The one she'd buried in the desert 22 years ago. Felt like a trap. But it also felt like the first real chance she'd had in decades. I'll think about it, she said. Don't think too long, Captain. This window won't stay open forever. The line went dead. Lena sat there, the phone still pressed to her ear, the silence roaring around her. She thought about Fallujah, about the Marine on her table, about the 3 soldiers who died holding the line, about the court-martial, the dishonorable discharge, the decades of exile. And then she thought about the GSW patient last night, about Governor Pritchard, about every life she'd saved in the 6 months since she'd come to Phoenix. She started the engine, pulled back onto the highway. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in 22 years, she felt like she was moving towards something instead of away from it. By the time she got back to her apartment, the sun was high and brutal. She climbed the stairs, unlocked the door, stepped inside. The place was small, bare. A bed, a table, a single chair. No photos, no mementos. Nothing that connected her to a past or a future. Just the present, stripped down to survival. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Reeves. People are talking. Is it true you used to be in the Army? Lena didn't answer. She lay back, stared at the ceiling. The exhaustion was catching up now, pulling her under. She closed her eyes, let herself drift. She was almost asleep when she heard it. A sound outside. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate. She sat up, her instincts flaring. Someone was coming. The knock was soft but firm. She stood, walked to the door, looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a blazer and slacks. She didn't look like FBI, didn't look like hospital administration. Lena opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Dr. Carter? My name is Rebecca Marsh. I'm an investigative reporter with the Phoenix Herald. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your time at Redwood General." Lena's stomach turned to ice. "I don't have anything to say." "Not even about the governor? About how you saved his life despite being suspended for fraudulent credentials?" "Where did you hear that?" Marsh's smile widened. "I have sources, and they're telling me a very interesting story. A story about a disgraced army surgeon who's been hiding in plain sight for 6 months. A story that people are going to want to read." Lena's hand tightened on the door. "You publish that, and you'll destroy lives. Or I'll expose the truth. Depends on how you look at it." Marsh pulled out a recorder, held it up. "So let's talk. On the record, tell me your side before someone else tells theirs." Lena stared at her, her mind racing. If this got out, if the media got hold of it before Wilder and Pritchard could fix it, everything would collapse. Not just her career, the hospital's reputation, Pritchard's goodwill, all of it. "I have nothing to say," Lena repeated and slammed the door. Marsh's voice called through the wood. "I'm running the story tomorrow morning, Dr. Carter, with or without your comment. You might want to reconsider." Lena stood frozen, her heart hammering. She heard Marsh's footsteps retreat down the stairs, heard a car start, heard it drive away. Then silence. She pulled out her phone, dialed Wilder. He answered on the second ring. "We have a problem," Lena said. Wilder arrived 20 minutes later, his SUV screeching to a stop outside Lena's apartment building. She was already waiting on the curb, arms crossed, her face tight with barely controlled anger. He didn't bother with pleasantries, just rolled down the window and said, "Get in." She did. The door slammed harder than necessary. "How bad?" Wilder asked, pulling back into traffic. "She knows everything. The suspension, the fake credentials, Iraq. She's running it tomorrow morning." "Did she say where she got it?" "No, but someone talked. Someone inside the hospital." Wilder's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone, made a call. "Yeah, it's me. I need a trace on Rebecca Marsh, Phoenix Herald. Financial records, phone logs, everything, and I need it yesterday." He listened for a moment, then hung up. "We'll find the leak, but that's not the immediate problem." "What is?" "Damage control. If this story breaks before we get ahead of it, you're done. Pritchard's done. The whole thing collapses." Lena stared out the window, her mind racing. "So what do we do?" "We go to war." Wilder's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "We get Pritchard to make a statement. We get the Army to accelerate your review, and we make sure that when Marsh's story drops, it's already old news." "You think that'll work?" "It has to." They drove to the hospital in silence. The afternoon sun was brutal, turning the pavement into a shimmering mirage. Inside, the hallways were quieter than usual, but Lena could feel the tension. Nurses stopped talking when she passed. A resident she'd never spoken to stared openly. Word was spreading, rumors twisting into something unrecognizable. Caldwell's office was on the top floor, a corner suite with windows overlooking the city. Wilder didn't knock. He just walked in, Lena behind him. Caldwell looked up from his desk, his expression sour. "Agent Wilder, I thought we agreed. We have a new problem." Wilder dropped a printed screenshot on the desk. It was Marsh's byline photo from the Herald's website. "This reporter is about to publish everything. Tomorrow morning, front page." Caldwell's face went pale. "How did she—" "Doesn't matter. What matters is stopping it." "I can't stop the press." "No, but the governor can get ahead of it. Put out a statement tonight. Thank Dr. Carter publicly. Frame the narrative before Marsh does." Caldwell leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "You're asking me to endorse someone who lied her way into this hospital." "I'm asking you to save your own ass," Wilder said flatly. "Because when this story breaks, every reporter in the state is going to be camped outside asking why you didn't vet her properly. And if you've already gone on record supporting her, you look like a hero instead of an idiot." But Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "That's manipulative. That's politics. You want to play or not?" For a long moment, Caldwell said nothing. Then he picked up his phone, dialed. "Get me the governor's office, now!" Lena stood near the window, watching the city sprawl below. She felt detached, like she was watching this happen to someone else. Everything was moving too fast. A week ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was about to be front-page news. Caldwell hung up. "Pritchard will make a statement at 6. Press conference in the main lobby. He wants you there." Lena turned. "What?" "He wants you standing next to him when he does it. Says it'll humanize the story." "I'm not a prop." "You are if you want to survive this." Caldwell's voice was sharp. "You don't get to be selective about your visibility now, Dr. Carter. You're either all in or you're out." Lena looked at Wilder. He nodded slightly. "Trust the process." "Fine," she said. "I'll be there." The press conference was chaos. Reporters packed the hospital lobby, cameras jostling for position, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Lena stood off to the side, behind a makeshift curtain, her hands shaking. She'd faced enemy fire in Iraq, operated in war zones, saved lives under impossible conditions. But this, standing in front of cameras, exposed, vulnerable, terrified her in a way combat never had. Pritchard was already at the podium, flanked by Caldwell and 2 of his own staffers. He looked better than he had that morning, stronger, though the IV port was still visible on his hand. He cleared his throat, and the room quieted. "Good evening. I'm here tonight to address recent reports about my medical care at Redwood General Hospital. As many of you know, I underwent emergency cardiac surgery 2 nights ago. That surgery saved my life. And the surgeon who performed the critical intervention was Dr. Lena Carter." The cameras swiveled, searching. Lena felt her stomach drop. "Dr. Carter is not your typical surgeon," Pritchard continued. "She served in the United States Army as a combat trauma surgeon. She deployed to Iraq, where she saved dozens of lives under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. And 22 years ago, she saved my son's life when his convoy was ambushed outside Fallujah." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones came out, reporters typing furiously. But Dr. Carter's service came at a cost. She was court-martialed for refusing to abandon a dying Marine during an evacuation. She was dishonorably discharged and stripped of her medical license. For 2 decades, she's lived in exile, punished not for failure, but for doing her job too well. Pritchard paused, his voice thickening. "I didn't know any of this when she saved my life. I didn't know her history. I just knew that when my heart was failing, she didn't hesitate. And because of her, I'm standing here today." He gestured toward the curtain. "Dr. Carter, please join me." Lena's legs felt like lead. Wilder appeared beside her, his hand on her elbow. "You've got this," he whispered. She stepped out into the lights. The flash of cameras was blinding. She walked to the podium, stood next to Pritchard. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the tremor in his hands, but his eyes were steady. "Dr. Carter has been suspended pending an investigation into her credentials," Pritchard said. "But I want to be clear, she should not be punished. She should be honored. And I'm calling on the U.S. Army to review her case immediately and restore her discharge status and medical license. This woman is a hero, and it's time she was treated like one." The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction. "Dr. Carter, did you lie on your application?" "Governor, are you saying the hospital made a mistake?" "What about the soldiers who died in Iraq?" Pritchard held up a hand. "We're not taking questions." "Thank you." He turned and walked off the stage. Lena followed, her ears ringing. Behind the curtain, Caldwell was waiting, his face unreadable. "That was either the smartest thing we've ever done or the dumbest. We'll find out tomorrow." Lena didn't respond. She just kept walking, through the back hallways, out a side exit, into the parking lot. The sun was setting now, the sky bruised purple and orange. Wilder caught up to her near her car. "You okay?" "No." "You did good in there." "I didn't do anything. I just stood there." "Sometimes that's enough." He leaned against her car, arms crossed. "Marsh is going to publish anyway. But now she's chasing our story instead of breaking it. That's a win." Lena pulled out her keys, her hand still shaking. "What happens now?" "Now we wait. The Army's reviewing your file. Pritchard's office is pushing hard. But these things take time." "I don't have time. The hospital won't keep me on leave forever. Then we make sure they don't have a choice. Before Lena could respond, Wilder's phone rang. He answered, listened, his face going hard. When? Where? He hung up, looked at Lena. There's been an explosion. Chemical plant on the west side. Mass casualties inbound to Redwood. EMS is calling every available trauma surgeon. Lena's heart kicked. I'm suspended. I know, but people are dying. You going to let that stop you? She stared at him. Then she threw open her car door. Follow me. They made it to the hospital in 8 minutes, lights and sirens clearing the way. The ER was already flooding, gurneys everywhere, patients screaming, nurses running. Lena pushed through the chaos toward the trauma bay. Doctor. Garrison was there, barking orders, his face red. He saw her and froze. What the hell are you doing here? Helping? You're suspended. People are dying. I don't care, you're not… A nurse interrupted. Dr. Garrison, we've got a sucking chest wound in Bay 2 and no one's available. Garrison hesitated, his jaw working. Lena didn't wait. She grabbed a gown from the rack, pulled it on, snapped on gloves. Garrison grabbed her arm. If you do this, I'm reporting you. She met his eyes. Then report me. She walked into Bay 2. A woman in her 40s lay on the gurney, her shirt soaked with blood, her breathing rapid and shallow. Lena didn't need a stethoscope to know. Pneumothorax. The lung had collapsed. She grabbed a scalpel, made the incision between the ribs, inserted the chest tube in 30 seconds. Air hissed out. The woman's breathing eased. Get her to X-ray, then surgery, Lena said to the nurse. She's got glass fragments in the lung. She'll need a thoracotomy. The nurse nodded, wheeled the woman out. Lena turned to the next patient, then the next. The chaos swallowed her the way it always did. She moved on instinct, her hands sure, her mind clear. This was what she was built for. Not press conferences, not politics. This. 2 hours later, the flood slowed. The critical cases were stabilized. The ER quieted. Lena stripped off her gloves, her scrubs soaked with sweat and blood. She walked to the sink, washed her hands, stared at her reflection in the metal surface. She looked like a ghost. Dr. Carter. She turned. Caldwell stood in the doorway, his face grim. Behind him, 2 security guards. Lena's stomach sank. You need to leave, Caldwell said. People needed help. I know, and I'm grateful, but you're still suspended, and you just violated that suspension in front of a dozen witnesses. So what, you're going to arrest me? No, but I am going to ask you to go home. Now, before this gets worse. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but she was too tired. She peeled off the gown, tossed it in the bin, walked past Caldwell without a word. The guards followed her to the exit, watched her climb into her car. She sat there for a moment, her head on the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. A photo. Lena in the trauma bay, mid-procedure, blood on her gloves. Below it, a message. Front page tomorrow. You're welcome. Marsh. Lena stared at the screen. Then she threw the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. She didn't know where she was going. She just drove, the city lights blurring past, the desert swallowing the horizon. She ended up at a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt metal. She ordered a cup, sat in the corner, stared at nothing. The TV above the counter was tuned to the local news. She wasn't paying attention until she heard her name. Breaking tonight. New details in the story of Dr. Lena Carter, the disgraced Army surgeon now at the center of a political firestorm. Sources tell us that despite being suspended from Redwood General Hospital, Dr. Carter returned tonight to treat victims of the chemical plant explosion. Questions are now being raised about whether she should face criminal charges for practicing without proper credentials. The screen cut to a reporter standing outside the hospital. The Army has yet to comment on Governor Pritchard's request to review Dr. Carter's discharge, but legal experts say the process could take months, if it happens at all. In the meantime, Dr. Carter remains in limbo, unable to practice legally, yet seemingly unable to stop. The image shifted. A photo of Lena from the press conference, standing next to Pritchard. Then another photo. Lena in the trauma bay tonight, her hands covered in blood. The juxtaposition was damning. Lena closed her eyes. This was it. The moment everything came apart. Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Wilder. She picked up. "Turn on the news," he said. "I'm watching it." "Not the local station, CNN." Lena grabbed the remote from the counter, switched channels. The national news anchor was mid-sentence, and in a rare move, the Secretary of Defense announced tonight that the Army will expedite its review of Captain Lena Carter's court-martial. In a statement released just minutes ago, the Secretary called Dr. Carter's case a matter of national importance and pledged a full investigation into the circumstances of her discharge. Lena's breath caught. The anchor continued. The announcement comes after Governor Alan Pritchard of Arizona publicly called for Dr. Carter's exoneration, citing her life-saving actions both in Iraq and at Redwood General Hospital. The story has captivated the nation, raising questions about military justice, redemption, and the price of doing what's right. The screen showed footage of the press conference again. Then a clip of soldiers in Iraq. Then Lena in the trauma bay. Wilder's voice came through the phone. "You're not in limbo anymore. You're in the spotlight, and the whole country's watching." Lena's hand tightened on the phone. "What does this mean?" "It means the Army can't bury this. It means Pritchard's gamble worked, but it also means the pressure just went nuclear. Every move you make from here on out is news. You understand?" "Yeah." "Good. Because I just got word, Colonel Hastings wants to see you in Washington tomorrow. They're flying you out at 0600. Lena's stomach turned. "Tomorrow?" "This is happening fast, faster than I expected. But that's good. It means they're taking it seriously. Or it means they're going to bury me in person. Could be both, but you don't have a choice. You're going." Lena hung up, set the phone on the table. She looked around the diner, empty except for a tired waitress and a truck driver nursing coffee at the counter. Normal people living normal lives. She'd forgotten what that felt like. She paid, left, walked back to her car. The night was cool now, the desert air carrying a hint of rain that would never come. She sat in the driver's seat, stared at the steering wheel. Washington. The Pentagon. The same people who destroyed her career were now offering to rebuild it. It felt like a trap, but it also felt inevitable. She started the engine, pulled onto the highway. The road stretched dark and empty ahead. She thought about Fallujah, about the Marine she'd saved, about the 3 soldiers who'd died. She thought about Daniel Pritchard bleeding out in the back of a Humvee, about the governor on the operating table, about the GSW patient, the woman with the collapsed lung, all the lives she'd pulled back from the edge. She thought about Rebecca Marsh and the story that would run tomorrow, about Caldwell and Garrison and all the people who'd dismissed her, underestimated her, tried to make her invisible. And she thought about what Wilder had said, "You're in the spotlight now." She was almost to her apartment when she saw the lights, red and blue, flashing in her rearview mirror. Her heart kicked. She pulled over, hands on the wheel, waiting. A police officer approached, flashlight in hand. "License and registration." She handed them over. The officer studied them, looked at her face, then back at the license. "Dr. Lena Carter?" "Yes." "Step out of the vehicle, please." Her chest tightened. "What's this about?" "Just step out, ma'am." She did. Slowly. The officer's hand rested on his holster, not threatening, but ready. Another cruiser pulled up behind the first. Then another. 3 cops now, all watching her. "Am I under arrest?" The first officer didn't answer. He spoke into his radio. "We've got her. Send the detail." "Send who?" A black SUV appeared, sliding to a stop behind the cruisers. The door opened. A man in a suit stepped out. Not Wilder, someone older, harder. He walked toward her, his credentials already out. "Dr. Carter, I'm Special Agent Dalton, DOD Criminal Investigation Division. You're being detained for questioning regarding potential violations of federal law, specifically impersonating a medical professional and practicing medicine without a valid license." Lena's world tilted. "I was cleared by no one. The Army's review hasn't concluded. The governor's statement doesn't grant you legal immunity. And your actions tonight violated the terms of your suspension." He gestured toward the SUV. "You need to come with us." "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one. After we talk." Lena looked at the officers, the SUV, the empty highway stretching into darkness. She thought about running, about fighting, but she was so damn tired. Fine, she said quietly. They put her in the SUV, no cuffs, but the doors locked from the outside. Dalton sat across from her, his face unreadable. They drove in silence, back toward the city, but not toward the hospital, toward the federal building downtown. Lena stared out the window. The lights of Phoenix glowed against the night sky, a city that had never really felt like home. She wondered if anywhere ever would. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A text from Wilder. "Where are you?" she typed back. "Being detained. DOD. 3 dots appeared, then, "Don't say anything. I'm on my way." The SUV pulled into an underground garage. They took her to a small room on the 3rd floor. Concrete walls, a metal table, 2 chairs. Dalton sat across from her, opened a folder. Inside were photos. Lena in the ER. Lena in the trauma bay. Lena at the press conference. "You've had a busy week," Dalton said. Lena didn't respond. "The thing is, Dr. Carter, you've put a lot of people in a very difficult position. The hospital, the governor, the army, and now the Department of Defense. Because every time you save a life, you're breaking the law. And we can't just ignore that. People were dying. I understand, but the law doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about your credentials. And right now, you don't have any." Lena leaned back in her chair. "So what happens now? You charge me? Lock me up?" "That depends on you." "On me how?" Dalton closed the folder. "The Army's review is moving forward. But it's going to take time. Weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, you can't practice. You can't go near a hospital. You can't do anything that even looks like medicine. If you agree to those terms, we'll release you tonight. If you don't," he shrugged, "we'll charge you and you'll sit in a cell until this gets sorted out." Lena's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to do nothing while people die. I'm asking you to follow the law. The law got it wrong. Maybe, but it's still the law." The door opened. Wilder walked in, his face hard. "This interview is over." Dalton looked up. "Agent Wilder, I was wondering when you'd show up. Dr. Carter isn't saying another word without counsel present. She's free to leave as soon as she agrees to the terms." Wilder turned to Lena. "Don't agree to anything." Dalton stood. "She doesn't have a choice. Either she stays away from medicine or we charge her. Those are the options." Wilder's voice dropped, dangerous. "You charge her, and this becomes a circus. Every news outlet in the country will be outside this building by morning. You ready for that?" "Are you?" The 2 men stared at each other. Lena felt the room closing in, the walls pressing tighter. She stood. "I'll agree." Wilder turned. "Lena, I'll stay away from the hospital. I won't practice. I'll wait for the review." Her voice was flat, dead. "Just let me go home." Dalton nodded. "Smart choice." They released her 10 minutes later. Wilder walked her to her car, his face tight with frustration. "You shouldn't have agreed. What else was I supposed to do? Fight?" "I'm tired of fighting." He stopped, looked at her. "No, you're not. You're just scared." She didn't argue, because he was right. She climbed into her car, started the engine. Wilder leaned down, his hand on the door. "Washington tomorrow, 0600. Don't miss that flight." "I won't." "And Lena? Whatever happens there, don't back down. You've come too far to quit now." She drove away, back to her apartment, back to the empty rooms and the silence. She lay on the bed, stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Marsh, Stories Live. Check the Herald website. Lena opened the link. The headline screamed, "Hero or Fraud? The Double Life of Dr. Lena Carter." Below it, her photo. The story detailed everything: Iraq, Fallujah, the court-martial, the fake credentials, the suspension, the chemical plant explosion. Marsh had talked to everyone. Nurses who'd worked with Lena, Garrison, who'd called her reckless and dangerous, Reeves, who'd said she was brilliant but unstable. And at the bottom, a quote from an unnamed Army source. Captain Carter's actions in Iraq directly led to the deaths of 3 soldiers. Her discharge was justified. Any attempt to overturn it would be a miscarriage of justice. Lena closed the browser, set the phone down. She felt numb, hollowed out, like she'd been running for so long that she'd forgotten how to stop. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, Washington. Tomorrow, the Pentagon. Tomorrow, the people who'd destroyed her would decide if she deserved a second chance. But tonight, All she had was the silence and the weight of 22 years pressing down on her chest. Her phone rang one more time. She almost didn't answer. But the caller ID said Pritchard Allen, Office of the Governor. She picked up. "Hello? Dr. Carter?" His voice was steady, calm. "I just read the Herald piece. I want you to know it changes nothing. I meant what I said. You're a hero, and I'm going to make sure the world knows it." Lena's throat tightened. "Thank you, Governor." "Don't thank me. Just get on that plane tomorrow and finish this." The line went dead. Lena sat in the darkness, her heart pounding. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Ambulances racing toward Redwood General, toward emergencies she couldn't answer. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, people were dying. And she was here, powerless, waiting for someone else to decide her fate. But tomorrow, she'd walk into the Pentagon. Tomorrow, she'd face the people who'd buried her. And tomorrow, she'd find out if 22 years of running had been worth it. Or if the system that broke her would break her again. The flight to Washington left at dawn, the sky still dark when Lena arrived at the terminal. Wilder was waiting near security, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He passed her one without a word. She took it, grateful, though her hands were steadier than they'd been in days. Something had shifted overnight. The fear was still there, coiled tight in her chest, but beneath it was something harder. Anger, maybe, or just exhaustion with being afraid. "You sleep?" Wilder asked. "No." "Good, neither did I." He gestured toward the gate. "We've got 2 hours in the air. Use it to prepare. Hastings isn't the only one you're meeting. There's a full panel. JAG officers, Medical Command, a representative from the Secretary's office. They're going to ask you everything." "I know." "And they're going to try to break you. That's the point. They want to see if you crack under pressure." Lena took a sip of coffee. It was bitter, overbrewed. Perfect. "I've been cracking under pressure for 22 years. I'm used to it." Wilder almost smiled. "That's the spirit." They boarded. The plane was half empty, filled mostly with business travelers and a few uniformed soldiers heading back to base. Lena took a window seat, stared out at the tarmac. The sun was starting to rise now, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. She thought about Fallujah, about another sunrise in another desert a lifetime ago. The memory didn't hurt as much as it used to, maybe because she was finally done running from it. Wilder sat beside her, pulled out a tablet. "I got the full court-martial transcript last night. Took some doing, but I got it. You want to read it?" "No." "You sure? It might help to know what they're basing their case on." "I lived it. I don't need to read it." He nodded, put the tablet away. The plane took off, climbing through thin clouds into a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Lena closed her eyes, let the hum of the engines wash over her. She thought about the Marine she'd saved in Fallujah, wondered if he was still alive, wondered if he knew what it had cost her to keep him breathing. Halfway through the flight, Wilder's phone buzzed. He read the message, his expression darkening. "Marsh published a follow-up. Says she's got evidence that you falsified not just your credentials, but your entire identity. Social security number, birth certificate, everything." Lena's chest tightened. How would she have that? Someone gave it to her, someone with access to federal databases. Who? "That's what I'm trying to figure out." He typed rapidly, sent a message. "But whoever it is, they're trying to bury you before the Army review even starts." Lena stared out the window. The ground below was a patchwork of farmland and highways, orderly and distant. Why would someone do that? Because you're a threat. You make people uncomfortable. You always have. "I just want to practice medicine." "I know. But you're also living proof that the system failed, and systems don't like being reminded of their failures." The plane began its descent into Reagan National just after 9. The city sprawled beneath them, monuments and marble gleaming in the morning sun. Lena had been here once before, during her initial officer training. She'd been 19, full of ambition and certainty. Now she was 41, scarred, stripped of everything she'd built. The irony wasn't lost on her. A car was waiting at the airport, another black SUV, this one driven by a stone-faced corporal who didn't speak. They drove through the city, past the Capitol, past the White House, finally turning into the vast complex of the Pentagon. Lena had never been inside. The building loomed, five-sided and imposing, a monument to power and bureaucracy. Security took 20 minutes. Wilder stayed with her the whole time, flashing credentials, vouching for her. Finally, they were escorted to a conference room on the third floor. It was stark, functional, a long table, uncomfortable chairs, no windows. 5 people were already seated. Lena recognized Colonel Hastings from his voice on the phone. The others were strangers. Hastings stood. "Captain Carter, thank you for coming." Lena didn't correct the rank. She just nodded. "Please sit." Hastings gestured to a chair at the head of the table. Lena sat. Wilder took a position along the wall, arms crossed, watching. Hastings introduced the panel: 2 JAG officers, a medical review board member, and a woman named Elizabeth Navarro from the secretary's office. They all had the same look: polite, professional, and completely unreadable. Navarro spoke first. "Captain Carter, we've reviewed the preliminary materials related to your case. Your service record is exemplary. Your medical outcomes in Iraq were among the best in your unit. But the court-martial findings are troubling. 3 soldiers died because you refused to evacuate. How do you reconcile that?" Lena met her eyes. "I don't." Navarro blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I don't reconcile it. 3 people died because I stayed. 1 person lived because I stayed. There's no reconciling that. It just is." One of the JAG officers leaned forward. "But you were given a direct order. You chose to disobey. That's insubordination. That's grounds for discharge." I made a choice. The order was to abandon a dying Marine. I couldn't do that. Even knowing the cost? Especially knowing the cost. The room went silent. Hastings folded his hands on the table. "Captain, we're not here to retry your court-martial. We're here to determine if procedural errors were made during the original proceedings. Errors that might warrant overturning the discharge." "Were there errors?" Lena asked. Hastings hesitated. Then he opened a folder, pulled out a document. "This is the evacuation order from December 12, 2003, the one you allegedly disobeyed." He slid it across the table. Lena picked it up, scanned it. Her breath caught. "This is dated wrong," she said quietly. "Yes, it's time-stamped 1347 hours. But according to witness statements, the order was given at 1412, 25 minutes after you were already in surgery." Lena stared at the document. Her hands started shaking. "You're saying the order came after I started operating?" "That's what the evidence suggests." One of the JAG officers spoke. "If that's true, then you didn't disobey an order. You simply couldn't comply with one that came too late." Lena's mind was racing. 22 years. 22 years she'd carried the guilt of disobedience, and it had been based on a lie. Why wasn't this caught during the trial? Hastings' face was grim. Because the officer who submitted the order, Major Vincent Crane, testified that it was issued at 1330, before your surgery, and no one questioned him. "Where's Crane now?" "Retired, living in Virginia." Hastings paused. "We've subpoenaed him. He'll be here tomorrow." Lena set the document down, her hands flat on the table to stop the shaking. "He lied under oath." "It appears so." "Why?" Navarro answered. "We're still investigating. But preliminary interviews suggest he was under pressure to assign blame for the deaths. You were an easy target. A trauma surgeon who stayed behind. It fit the narrative." Lena's jaw tightened. "So I was court-martialed because someone needed a scapegoat." "That's one interpretation." "What's another?" "That mistakes were made in the fog of war, and those mistakes compounded into an injustice." Navarro's voice softened slightly. "We can't undo the past 22 years, Captain. But we can correct the record, if you're willing." Lena looked around the table. These people held her future in their hands. They could restore her rank, her license, her name. Or they could bury her deeper. She thought about Pritchard, about Wilder, about the patients she'd saved and the ones she couldn't. She thought about the Marine on her table in Fallujah, the one whose life had cost her everything. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Hastings pulled out another folder. "Your testimony. On record. Everything that happened that day. We'll compare it to the existing statements, identify discrepancies, build a case for overturning the discharge." And if Crane denies lying, then it's your word against his. But we have the timestamp. That's hard evidence. Lena nodded slowly. When do we start? Now. They spent the next 4 hours going through every detail of December 12th, 2003. Lena described the convoy attack, the casualties flooding in, the decision to operate. She described the Marine, Lance Corporal Ethan Reyes, 19 years old, shrapnel in his liver and spleen. She described the surgery, the chaos outside, the explosions getting closer. And she described the moment a runner came into the tent and told her to evacuate. By then, Reyes was on the table, his abdomen open, bleeding controlled, but not stopped. Leaving would have killed him. I told the runner to give me 10 minutes, Lena said. He said we didn't have 10 minutes. I said I didn't care. I had to finish. One of the JAG officers was taking notes. And the runner left? Yes. He went back to report. That's when the hostile fire started. Small arms, then mortars. The perimeter team engaged. I could hear it all. But I couldn't stop. I was too deep in. How long did it take you to finish? 15 minutes? Maybe 20? I closed, got Reyes stabilized, called for the evac. But by then, 3 soldiers were dead. Corporal James Diaz, Specialist Angela Ruiz, Private First Class Marcus Lee. They died holding the line while I operated. Navarro's voice was quiet. Did you know them? I knew Diaz. He'd come to the aid station a week earlier with a sprained ankle, joked that it was just an excuse to get out of patrol. Lena's voice cracked slightly. I told him to stay off it. He didn't listen. The room went silent. Hastings closed his folder. Thank you, Captain. That's enough for today. We'll reconvene tomorrow when Major Crane arrives. Lena stood, her legs stiff. Wilder was at her side immediately, guiding her out of the room. They walked through the maze of hallways in silence. Outside, the sun was setting, the sky streaked with orange and purple. Wilder led her to the SUV, opened the door. You did good in there, he said. Lena didn't respond. She climbed in, stared out the window as they drove through the city. Her mind kept replaying the testimony, the names of the soldiers who'd died. She'd carried those names for 22 years, and now she was finding out it might not have been her fault. The relief should have been overwhelming, but all she felt was hollow. They checked into a hotel near the Pentagon. Wilder walked her to her room, handed her a key card. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be harder. How? Because Crane's going to fight. Men like him don't admit mistakes. Lena nodded, closed the door. The room was generic, impersonal. A bed, a desk, a window overlooking a parking lot. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. Her phone buzzed. A text from Pritchard. How did it go? She typed back. They found evidence the order was faked. 3 dots appeared. Then, good. Bury him. Lena almost smiled. She set the phone down, lay back on the bed. Sleep didn't come. She just stared at the ceiling, counting the hours until morning. Crane arrived at the Pentagon at 10 a.m. Lena saw him through the conference room window. A man in his late 60s, silver hair, crisp civilian clothes. He walked with the stiff precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime in uniform. Hastings met him in the hallway, shook his hand, escorted him inside. Crane didn't look at Lena. He just took a seat across the table, folded his hands, and waited. Hastings started the recording. Major Vincent Crane, retired. Thank you for joining us. We're conducting a review of the court-martial proceedings of Captain Lena Carter, specifically related to events on December 12, 2003. You were the commanding officer who issued the evacuation order that day. Is that correct? Crane's voice was steady, rehearsed. Yes. And you testified during the court-martial that the order was issued at 13:30 hours. That's correct? Hastings slid the timestamp document across the table. This is the written order. It's time-stamped 13:47 hours. Crane picked it up, studied it. His expression didn't change. There must be an error in the system timestamp. Or an error in your testimony. I stand by my testimony. Navarro leaned forward. Major, we have witness statements placing Captain Carter in surgery at 13:30. She couldn't have disobeyed an order she hadn't received yet. Crane set the document down. Memory is imperfect. Combat situations are chaotic. I reported what I believed to be accurate. Or what you needed to be accurate, Lena said quietly. Crane's eyes snapped to her. Excuse me? You needed someone to blame for those deaths, and I was convenient. His face flushed. I did my duty. Your duty was to tell the truth. You lied under oath. I did no such thing. Hastings held up a hand. Captain Carter, let's... No. Lena stood, her hands flat on the table. I've spent 22 years believing I killed 3 people because I disobeyed orders. I lost my career, my license, everything, because you lied. Crane stood as well, his voice rising. I didn't lie. You disobeyed. You stayed behind when you were ordered to leave. The order came too late. That's not what I remember. Then your memory is wrong. Or you're lying. Which is it? The room erupted. Hastings tried to restore order. Navarro was on her feet. One of the JAG officers was shouting for silence, but Lena didn't sit. She kept her eyes locked on Crane, watching as his composure started to crack. I remember what I remember, Crane said, his voice shaking now. I gave that order at 13:30. I know I did. Then prove it, Lena said. I don't have to prove anything to you. Yes, you do. Because if you're wrong, if you lied, then 3 people died for nothing, and I was punished for saving a life. Crane's face went white. He sat down heavily. The fight drained out of him. I don't know. It was a long time ago. Everything was chaos. Maybe I got the time wrong. Maybe... Hastings leaned forward. Major Crane, are you saying your testimony was inaccurate? Crane didn't answer. He just sat there staring at the table. Navarro's voice was cold. Major, you're under oath right now. If you lied during the original proceedings, you can be charged with perjury. So I'll ask you one more time. Did you issue the evacuation order at 13:30 or at 13:47? The silence stretched. Then Crane's shoulders sagged. I don't know. I thought it was 13:30, but the timestamp says 13:47. I must have been wrong. Lena's breath left her in a rush. She sat down, her legs suddenly weak. Hastings closed the folder. This hearing is adjourned. We'll reconvene after the panel reviews the new testimony. Crane stood, walked out without looking at anyone. Lena watched him go, feeling nothing. No triumph, no vindication, just exhaustion. Wilder appeared at her side. That's it. You won. Doesn't feel like winning. It never does. They left the Pentagon an hour later. Wilder drove her back to the hotel, but she couldn't stay in the room. She walked instead through the city, past the monuments and museums. The sun was setting by the time she reached the Vietnam Memorial, the black wall reflecting the dying light. She stood there, staring at the names carved into the stone, thousands of them. Soldiers who'd died in another war, another lifetime. She thought about Diaz, Ruiz, Lee, wondered if their names were on a wall somewhere, wondered if anyone still remembered them. Her phone rang. Hastings, she answered. Captain Carter, the panel has reached a decision. Your discharge is being overturned, effective immediately. You're reinstated to the rank of Captain, U.S. Army Medical Corps. Your medical license will be restored within 48 hours. Lena closed her eyes. Thank you, Colonel. Don't thank me. You earned this. Every bit of it. He paused. There's more. The Secretary wants to meet you tomorrow. He's considering a formal apology and possibly a promotion. I don't want a promotion. I just want to practice medicine. Understood. But you should take the meeting anyway. It's important. Lena hung up, stood in the fading light. She should have felt relieved. She should have felt something, but all she felt was tired. She walked back to the hotel, climbed the stairs to her room. Wilder was waiting in the hallway. I heard. Congratulations. Thanks. You going back to Phoenix? I don't know yet. He nodded, handed her an envelope. This came for you, from Redwood General. Lena opened it. Inside was a letter from Caldwell, short, formal. Dr. Carter, in light of recent developments, your suspension has been lifted. Your position as a surgical resident is available if you choose to return. Regards, Doctor. Harrison Caldwell. Lena folded the letter, put it back in the envelope. He didn't apologize. He won't. Men like him don't. Then why should I go back? Wilder shrugged. Because it's unfinished. Because Garrison and Reeves and all the others who dismissed you Need to see you walk through those doors with your license in hand. Because you earned it. Lena looked at him. You think I should go back? I think you should do whatever the hell you want. But, yeah, I think you should go back. She went to bed early, slept for the first time in days. When she woke, the sun was streaming through the window, bright and unforgiving. She showered, dressed, packed her bag. The meeting with the secretary was at 10. She took a cab to the Pentagon, went through security, was escorted to an office on the top floor. The Secretary of Defense was a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and efficient. She stood when Lena entered, shook her hand firmly. Captain Carter, I've been looking forward to meeting you. Ma'am. Please sit. The secretary gestured to a chair. I've read your file, all of it. What happened to you was unconscionable. The Army failed you. I want you to know that. Lena didn't respond. She just waited. We're prepared to offer you a formal apology and a commission to return to active duty, if you're interested. The Army could use someone with your skills. I'm not interested in active duty. Then what are you interested in? Lena met her eyes. Practicing medicine. That's all I've ever wanted. The secretary nodded slowly. I understand. Then consider this meeting a courtesy and an acknowledgement. You were wronged. We're making it right. That's all. Lena stood. Thank you, ma'am. She left the Pentagon, climbed into the waiting car. Wilder was in the passenger seat. How'd it go? Short? Good or bad? Neither. Just done. They drove to the airport. Lena's flight back to Phoenix left at 2. She checked in, went through security, sat at the gate. Her phone buzzed. A text from Pritchard. I saw the news. Well done, Captain. Another text, this one from Reeves. Is it true? You're coming back? Lena didn't answer either. She just sat there, watching the planes take off and land, carrying people to places she'd never been. When her flight was called, she stood, walked to the gate. Wilder appeared beside her. I'm not coming with you. Got another case. But I'll check in. You don't have to. I know, but I will anyway. He held out his hand. Lena shook it. Thanks for everything. Don't thank me yet. You've still got to face Garrison. Lena almost smiled. Yeah, I do. She boarded the plane, took her seat. The flight was smooth, uneventful. She stared out the window, watching the country slide past below. Somewhere over Kansas, her phone buzzed again. A voicemail. She listened. It was Garrison. His voice was tight, formal. Dr. Carter, I heard about your reinstatement. I may have been too quick to judge. If you're returning to Redwood, I'd like to speak with you. Clear the air. Lena deleted the message. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need anything from him. The plane landed in Phoenix just after 6. The sun was setting, the desert glowing gold and red. Lena took a cab to her apartment, climbed the stairs, unlocked the door. The place looked exactly as she'd left it, empty. Waiting. She dropped her bag, sat on the edge of the bed. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her. Dr. Carter? The voice was unfamiliar, young, nervous. Yes? This is Corporal Ethan Reyes. I don't know if you remember me. You saved my life in Iraq. In 2003. Lena's breath caught. I remember. I heard what happened, the discharge being overturned. I wanted to call and say, thank you for not giving up on me, even when it cost you everything. Lena's throat tightened. You're welcome. I named my daughter after you, Lena Marie Reyes. She's 5 now. I tell her about you, about the surgeon who wouldn't let me die. Lena closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. That means more than you know. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. The line went dead. Lena sat in the silence, holding the phone, letting herself cry for the first time in 22 years. When she finally stopped, the apartment was dark. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. Tomorrow, she'd go back to Redwood General. Tomorrow, she'd face Garrison and Caldwell and everyone who'd dismissed her. Tomorrow, she'd reclaim her place. But tonight, she let herself rest. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Marsh. Congratulations on your reinstatement. I'd like to do a follow-up interview. Interested? Lena stared at the message. Then she typed back, no. She turned off the phone, set it on the table. Outside, the city hummed with life. Sirens wailed in the distance. Somewhere, someone was dying. Somewhere, someone was being saved. And tomorrow, she'd be part of that again. But as she stood there, staring out at the lights, a car pulled up outside her building. The door opened. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a suit, moving with purpose. Lena's chest tightened. She recognized the walk, the posture. Garrison. He climbed the stairs, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Lena didn't move. She just waited. The knock came. 3 sharp raps. She opened the door. Garrison stood there, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the chemical plant explosion. About the patients I treated that night." His voice was barely above a whisper. "One of them died, Lena, and it's on me." Lena stepped aside, let him in. Garrison walked to the center of the small apartment, looked around like he'd never seen a place this empty. He turned to face her, his shoulders sagging. "I don't know where else to go." "Start at the beginning," Lena said, closing the door. Garrison exhaled slowly, rubbed his face. "The night of the explosion. You remember the guy with the chest wound? The one you stabilized before Caldwell kicked you out?" "I remember. He coded an hour after you left. We got him back, sent him to surgery. Dr. Harlow operated, found a small bleeder you'd missed. Harlow clipped it, closed him up. Guy was stable. Should have been fine." Garrison's voice cracked. "But I was the attending monitoring post-op, and I didn't catch the signs. His oxygen levels started dropping, slowly. I thought it was normal post-surgical stress. By the time I realized something was wrong, he'd already thrown a clot. Massive pulmonary embolism. Dead before we could get him back to the OR." Lena crossed her arms. "What does this have to do with me?" "Because if you'd been there, if Caldwell hadn't suspended you, you would have caught it. You would have seen the signs I missed." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. You're better than me, Lena. You've always been better. And I've spent 6 months pretending you weren't because it was easier than admitting I'm not as good as I thought I was." He sat down heavily on her single chair. "The family's filing a wrongful death suit. Against me. Against the hospital. And their right to do it." Lena walked to the window, stared out at the darkening city. She should have felt vindicated, should have felt satisfaction watching Garrison crumble, but she just felt tired. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need to know. If you'd been monitoring him, would he still be alive?" She turned to face him. "I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Medicine isn't magic, Peter. People die, even when we do everything right." "But I didn't do everything right. I got complacent. I missed it." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And now he's dead." Lena walked over, stood in front of him. "You want me to tell you it's not your fault?" "I want you to tell me the truth. The truth is you made a mistake, a bad one, and someone died because of it. That's the truth." She paused. "But it's also true that you're not the first doctor to make that mistake, and you won't be the last. The question is what you do now." Garrison looked up at her. "What should I do?" "Own it. Don't hide. Don't make excuses. Tell the family what happened. Tell the board. Take responsibility." Lena's voice softened slightly. "And then decide if you're going to let it destroy you, or if you're going to learn from it and be better." He stood, his eyes red. "I don't deserve your advice. Not after how I treated you." "No, you don't, but I'm giving it anyway." Garrison nodded, walked to the door. He stopped, hand on the knob. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it." "I know." He left. Lena stood alone in the apartment, the silence pressing in. She thought about the patient who died, about Garrison's mistakes, about her own. She thought about the 3 soldiers in Fallujah, about all the lives saved and lost. Medicine was always a trade. You saved one, lost another. The key was not to let the losses make you stop trying. Her phone rang. Caldwell. She answered. "Dr. Carter, I assume Garrison came to see you." "He did." "Then you know about the lawsuit?" "Yes." Caldwell's voice was clipped, professional. "The board is meeting tomorrow morning. Emergency session. Garrison's future at the hospital will be discussed. I wanted you to know you're being asked to attend. Why? Because you were there that night, because you stabilized the patient initially, and because, he paused, because the board wants to hear from you about Garrison's competency. Lena's chest tightened. You want me to testify against him? I want you to tell the truth, whatever that is. She hung up without responding. She paced the apartment, her mind racing. This was it, the moment she could bury Garrison the way he'd tried to bury her. One word from her and his career was over. The board would use her testimony to justify termination, and she'd be vindicated. But she thought about Garrison's face tonight, the brokenness, the regret. She thought about herself 22 years ago, standing in front of a court-martial panel, being judged for a choice made in impossible circumstances. She remembered the faces of the officers who'd condemned her without mercy. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. Justice and revenge weren't the same thing. She'd learned that the hard way. The next morning, she walked into Redwood General at 8. The hospital felt different, quieter, tense. Nurses glanced at her as she passed, whispered. A resident she didn't recognize stared openly. Word had spread. The disgraced surgeon was back. She took the elevator to the 4th floor, walked to the boardroom. Caldwell was waiting outside. Dr. Carter, thank you for coming. I'm not here to help you fire Garrison. Caldwell's expression didn't change. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to tell the board what you saw that night. Nothing more. The boardroom was full. 12 people seated around a long table. Hospital administrators, senior physicians, a lawyer. Garrison sat at one end, his face pale, his hands folded in front of him. He didn't look at Lena when she entered. The board chair, a severe woman in her 60s named Dr. Patricia Vance, gestured to an empty seat. Dr. Carter, please. Lena sat. Vance wasted no time. Dr. Carter, you were present in the ER on the night of the chemical plant explosion. You treated a patient with a penetrating chest wound, is that correct? Yes. And you stabilized him before being asked to leave the hospital due to your suspension? Yes. Can you describe the patient's condition when you left him in Dr. Garrison's care? Lena glanced at Garrison. He was staring at the table, his jaw tight. He was stable. The chest tube was functioning, his vitals were holding, but he'd lost a lot of blood. He needed close monitoring. And in your professional opinion, did Dr. Garrison provide adequate monitoring? The room went silent. Every eye was on her. She could feel the weight of the question, the trap it represented. If she said no, Garrison was finished. If she said yes, she'd be lying. I wasn't there, Lena said carefully. I can't speak to what happened after I left. But you can speak to Dr. Garrison's general competency as a physician. You've worked with him for 6 months. Lena met Vance's eyes. Doctor, Garrison is a skilled physician. He's knowledgeable, experienced, and capable. But he's also arrogant. He dismisses people he considers beneath him, and that arrogance creates blind spots. Garrison's head snapped up. Lena! Vance held up a hand. Let her finish. Lena continued, her voice steady. That patient died because Dr. Garrison missed the signs of a pulmonary embolism. He missed them because he was overconfident. He assumed everything was fine instead of staying vigilant. That's a failure of judgment, not skill. Vance leaned forward. And do you believe that failure warrants termination? No. The room erupted in murmurs. Vance's eyebrows rose. No? He made a mistake, a serious one. But I've made mistakes too. Every doctor in this room has. The question isn't whether he made a mistake, it's whether he learns from it. Garrison was staring at her now, his expression unreadable. Vance's voice was cold. Dr. Carter, a man is dead because of Dr. Garrison's negligence. You're saying we should overlook that? I'm saying you should hold him accountable without destroying him. Suspend his privileges, require additional training, put him on probation, but don't end his career over one mistake. Lena paused. Because if you do that, you're setting a standard that none of us can meet. We're human, we fail. And if the penalty for failure is always termination, then no one will ever admit when they're wrong. And that kills more people than any single mistake ever could. The room went silent. Vance sat back, her fingers steepled. Thank you, Dr. Carter. You're dismissed. Lena stood, walked out. She didn't wait to hear the verdict. She just kept walking, down the hallway, into the stairwell, out into the parking lot. The morning sun was brutal, already baking the asphalt. She leaned against her car, closed her eyes, let herself breathe. Footsteps approached. She opened her eyes. Garrison stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." "Why did you?" Lena looked at him. "Because I know what it's like to be judged without mercy. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Garrison's eyes were wet. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just be better." He nodded, turned, walked back toward the hospital. Lena watched him go, then climbed into her car. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caldwell. "The board has decided. Garrison is suspended for 6 months. Mandatory retraining. Probation for 2 years after reinstatement. Thank you for your testimony." Lena set the phone down, started the engine. She drove aimlessly for a while, through the city, past the hospital, out into the desert. She pulled over at a scenic overlook, got out, stared at the vast expanse of sand and rock stretching to the horizon. The silence was absolute. Her phone rang. Pritchard. "Governor? I heard about the board meeting. You could have buried him." "I know." "But you didn't. Why?" Lena thought about it. "Because justice and revenge aren't the same thing, and I've had enough revenge to last a lifetime." Pritchard's voice softened. "You're a better person than most, Captain." "I'm just tired, Governor." "Then rest. You've earned it." He paused. "But before you do, there's something you should know. The hospital board is meeting again tomorrow to discuss a new position, Director of Trauma Surgery. They want to offer it to you." Lena's breath caught. "What?" "Caldwell called me this morning. Said the hospital needs someone who can lead the trauma department, someone with combat experience, someone who can handle pressure, someone who won't back down when things get hard. He said there's only one person who fits that description." Lena closed her eyes. Director of Trauma Surgery, the position she'd never dared to dream of. The position that would give her real authority, real power to shape how medicine was practiced at Redwood General. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You've been ready for 22 years. You just didn't have the chance." She hung up, stood in the desert silence. Director of Trauma Surgery. It felt surreal. A week ago, she'd been a ghost. Now she was being offered a position that would make her one of the most influential surgeons in the hospital. She drove back to the city, parked outside Redwood General. She sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the building. Then she got out, walked inside. The ER was busy. Patients on gurneys, nurses running, the controlled chaos she'd missed during her suspension. She walked through, past the trauma bays, up the stairs to Caldwell's office. He was on the phone when she arrived. He waved her in, finished the call, hung up. "Dr. Carter, I assume the governor told you." "He did." "And? Why me?" Caldwell leaned back in his chair. "Because you're the best we have. You proved that the night you saved the governor. You proved it again last night during the explosion. And you proved it this morning when you showed more integrity than most of the doctors in this building combined. I also lied my way into this hospital. Yes, and we're choosing to overlook that, because the alternative is losing you, and we can't afford that." Lena sat down. "What about the staff? Half of them think I'm a fraud." "Then you'll prove them wrong. The way you've been proving people wrong your whole life." She stared at him. "You really think I can do this?" "I know you can. The question is whether you want to." Lena thought about it. Thought about the 6 months she'd spent invisible, dismissed, underestimated. Thought about the decades before that, exiled and erased. Thought about every patient she'd saved, every life she'd fought for. This was the chance to do it on her terms. To build a trauma program that worked. To train residents who wouldn't make the mistakes she'd seen. To create something that mattered. "I want to," she said quietly. Caldwell smiled. "Good. The board meets tomorrow at 9. Be ready to accept the position officially." Lena left his office, walked back down to the ER. Reeves was there, treating a kid with a broken arm. She looked up when Lena passed, did a double take. "Doctor? Carter? You're back." "I'm back." Reeves set down the splint, walked over. "I heard about Washington, about your discharge being overturned. I'm sorry for the things I said, for not taking you seriously. It's fine." "No, it's not. You were the best surgeon here, and I treated you like you were invisible. Reeves's voice was sincere. I'd like to learn from you, if you'll let me. Lena studied her. Reeves was young, ambitious, capable. Rough around the edges, but so had Lena been at that age. You really mean that? Yes. Then show up tomorrow, Trauma Bay, 6 a.m. I'm going to teach you how to run a code without panicking. Reeves's face lit up. I'll be there. Lena walked out of the hospital into the late afternoon sun. Her phone buzzed, a text from Wilder. Saw the news about the director position. Congratulations, you deserve it. She texted back. Thanks for everything. 3 dots appeared. Then, just doing my job. But for what it's worth, you're one of the toughest people I've ever met. Don't let anyone tell you different. Lena smiled, pocketed the phone. She drove home, climbed the stairs to her apartment. It still looked empty, barren, but for the first time it didn't feel temporary. It felt like a place she could build from. She spent the evening cleaning, organizing, making the space feel less like a hiding place and more like a home. She hung a photo on the wall, one of the few things she'd kept from her army days. A group shot of her medical unit in Iraq, faces she hadn't seen in decades. Some of them were probably dead now, others scattered across the country, living lives she'd never know. But she'd been part of something once, and now she was part of something again. The next morning, she arrived at the hospital at 8. The boardroom was full again. Vance presided, the same stern expression on her face. But when Lena entered, Vance stood. Dr. Carter, on behalf of Redwood General Hospital, I'm pleased to offer you the position of Director of Trauma Surgery, effective immediately. The room applauded. Not everyone, Lena could see a few skeptical faces, but enough. She shook Vance's hand, accepted the formal offer letter. It felt surreal, holding the paper that officially made her more than just a resident. That made her a leader. After the meeting, Caldwell pulled her aside. There's a press conference scheduled for this afternoon. The hospital wants to announce your appointment publicly. Show that we're committed to excellence, to integrity, all that. You comfortable with that? Lena thought about Rebecca Marsh, about the cameras, about being in the spotlight again. Then she thought about the 22 years she'd spent in the shadows. Yeah, I'm comfortable. The press conference was held in the main lobby at 3. Reporters packed the room. Local news, a few national outlets, cameras everywhere. Lena stood at the podium, Caldwell beside her. Pritchard had come as well, sitting in the front row, his presence a silent endorsement. Caldwell spoke first, outlining Lena's qualifications, her reinstatement, her new role. Then he stepped aside, gestured for her to speak. Lena stepped to the microphone. The room quieted. She looked out at the cameras, the reporters, the faces waiting for her to say something profound. I'm not good at speeches, she began. I'm better with my hands than my words. But I'll say this. 22 years ago, I made a choice. I stayed with a patient when I was ordered to leave. That choice cost me everything. My rank, my license, my identity. For 2 decades, I lived in exile, punished for doing what I believed was right. She paused, her voice steady. But I never stopped believing in medicine. I never stopped believing that saving lives mattered. And when I came to Redwood General 6 months ago, I thought I could just disappear into the work, be invisible, not make waves, but that's not who I am. It's never been who I am. A few people in the audience nodded. Pritchard was smiling. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I'll make more. But I'm here because I believe in second chances. I believe in redemption. And I believe that the measure of a person isn't whether they fall, it's whether they get back up. Lena looked directly at the cameras. So to everyone watching this who's ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told they don't belong, don't give up. Don't let anyone make you invisible. Fight for your place. Earn it, and then use it to make things better. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Lena didn't answer them. She just walked off the stage, out the side door, back into the hospital. Reeves was waiting in the hallway. That was incredible. It was necessary. You're going to change this place, aren't you? Lena looked around at the busy hallways, the patients on gurneys, the controlled chaos of a hospital at work. I'm going to try. She spent the rest of the afternoon in the trauma bay, working with Reeves and 2 other residents, running through protocols, discussing cases. It felt good to teach, to shape the next generation, to pass on the lessons she'd learned the hard way. At 6, she walked out to the parking lot. The sun was setting, the sky streaked with orange and gold. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. "Captain Carter, this is Lance Corporal Ethan Reyes. I wanted you to know I'm watching your press conference with my daughter. She asked if you were a superhero. I told her you were something better. You were real. Thank you for everything. Ethan." Lena closed her eyes, felt the tears come. She let them. For the first time in 22 years, they weren't tears of grief or regret. They were tears of relief, of release, of finally being free. She wiped her eyes, climbed into her car. As she started the engine, she saw a figure approaching. Garrison. He walked up to her window. She rolled it down. "I heard about the director position," he said. "Congratulations." "Thanks. I meant what I said. I'm going to be better. Because of you." Lena nodded. "Good." He walked away. Lena drove out of the parking lot, into the city. The streets were busy with evening traffic, people heading home, starting their nights. She thought about where she'd been a week ago, suspended, hunted, barely holding on. And now she was director of trauma surgery. Vindicated, restored. But it wasn't the title that mattered. It was the work, the patients, the lives. She drove to a small diner on the edge of town, the same one she'd been to the night before Washington. She ordered coffee, sat in the corner booth, watched the news on the TV above the counter. Her press conference was playing. She heard her own voice, saw her own face. It felt strange seeing herself like that. Public, visible, no longer a ghost. The waitress came over, refilled her cup. "That's you, isn't it?" Lena nodded. "Saw the story in the paper. About Iraq and everything. That took guts." "Thanks." The waitress smiled, walked away. Lena sipped her coffee, watched the sun disappear below the horizon. Her phone buzzed again. Wilder. "One more thing. The DOD investigator who detained you, Dalton, he's been reassigned. Turns out he was leaking information to Marsh, trying to sabotage your case. He's under investigation now." Lena typed back. "Good." 3 dots. Then, "You won, Lena. All the way. Enjoy it." She set the phone down, stared at the empty diner. She'd won. Against Garrison, against Crane, against Dalton, against the entire system that had tried to bury her. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival, like she'd crawled through hell and somehow made it out the other side. But she had made it. That was the point. She paid, left, drove home. The apartment didn't feel as empty anymore. She unpacked the few boxes she'd never bothered to open, found some old books, a few mementos from medical school. She set them on the shelf, made the place feel lived in. At midnight, her phone rang. Caldwell. "Dr. Carter, sorry to call so late, but we have a situation. Mass casualty incident, multi-car pile-up on the interstate. 15 casualties inbound. We need all hands." Lena was already grabbing her keys. "I'm on my way." She drove to the hospital, parked in the staff lot, ran inside. The ER was already flooding, gurneys everywhere, blood on the floor, nurses shouting. She grabbed a gown, gloves, moved into the chaos. Reeves was there, along with 3 other residents. They looked overwhelmed. Lena's voice cut through the noise. "Listen up. We triage by severity. Red tags go to trauma bays 1 and 2. Yellow tags to 3 and 4. Green tags wait. If someone's coding, you call me. No one dies tonight unless there's nothing we can do. Got it?" They nodded. Lena moved from patient to patient, assessing, directing, operating. A collapsed lung, a ruptured spleen, a pelvic fracture. She worked for 6 hours straight, her hands steady, her mind clear. This was what she was built for. This was home. By dawn, the chaos had settled. 14 patients stabilized. 1 DOA, nothing they could have done. Lena stripped off her gloves, walked to the sink, washed her hands. Reeves appeared beside her. "That was incredible. You saved at least 5 people who should have died." "We saved them, not just me." Reeves smiled. "Still, I've never seen anyone move like that. You didn't hesitate, not once." You learn not to hesitate when hesitation means someone dies. "Teach me that, please." Lena looked at her. "You really want to learn?" "More than anything." "Then be here tomorrow, 6 a.m. We're going to run drills, real ones, the kind that make you uncomfortable. I'll be here. Lena walked out of the ER into the early morning light. The sun was just rising, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. She stood in the parking lot, her scrubs still stained with blood, her body exhausted. But she felt alive, truly alive. For the first time in 22 years, her phone buzzed. Pritchard. Heard about last night. You're already proving them right, she texted back. Just doing my job. No, you're doing what you were always meant to do, and the world is better for it. Lena pocketed the phone, climbed into her car. She drove home, showered, changed. At 8, she was back at the hospital for morning rounds. The trauma bays were full of the patients from last night. She checked on each one, reviewed charts, adjusted treatment plans. At 10, Vance called her to the boardroom. Lena walked in, expecting another meeting, but the room was empty except for Vance and Caldwell. Vance stood. Dr. Carter, we wanted to speak with you privately. About Dr. Garrison. Lena's chest tightened. What about him? He resigned this morning. Effective immediately? Lena sat down heavily. Why? Caldwell answered. He said he couldn't stay. Not after what happened. He's taking a position at a smaller hospital in Nevada, teaching. He said he needs to step back, reevaluate. Lena stared at the table. Did he say anything else? He left you a letter. Caldwell handed her an envelope. Lena opened it. Inside, a single handwritten page. Lena, I'm leaving because I need to figure out who I am without the arrogance. You showed me that yesterday. You could have destroyed me, but you gave me a chance instead. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm going to try to earn it. Thank you. For everything. Lena folded the letter, put it in her pocket. He's going to be okay. Vance nodded. We think so too. Lena left the meeting, walked back to the ER. The day continued. Patients, procedures, teaching. At 6, she finally allowed herself to leave. She drove home, climbed the stairs, unlocked the door. The apartment felt warm now, lived in. She made dinner, ate alone, watched the news. Her story was still running, but it was fading. Soon, it would be yesterday's news. And that was fine. She didn't need the spotlight. She just needed the work. At midnight, she lay in bed, stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. A text from Wilder. How's it feel to be director of trauma? Exhausting. Good exhausting or bad exhausting? Good. Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Lena smiled, set the phone down. She closed her eyes, let herself drift. For the first time in 22 years, she slept without nightmares, without guilt, without the weight of the past pressing down on her chest. She woke at 5, showered, dressed. At 6, she was at the hospital. Reeves was already there, waiting in the trauma bay. 3 other residents joined them. Lena spent the morning teaching, running codes, practicing intubations, drilling emergency procedures. They made mistakes. She corrected them. They tried again. By noon, they were better. Not perfect, but better. At 2, a 10-year-old boy came in. Hit by a car. Severe head trauma. Lena operated for 4 hours, removing a subdural hematoma, relieving the pressure on his brain. When she finally closed, his vitals were stable. The neurosurgeon monitoring the case nodded his approval. Nice work, Dr. Carter. Thanks. She walked out of the OR, stripped off her gown. Reeves was waiting. Is he going to make it? I think so. But it's too early to know for sure. You saved him. We'll see. But 3 days later, the boy woke up. His parents were there, crying, holding his hands. Lena checked on him, reviewed his charts. He'd make a full recovery. The parents thanked her over and over. She just nodded, told them to focus on their son. 2 weeks later, the hospital held a staff meeting. Lena stood at the front, outlined her plans for the trauma department, new protocols, better training, closer monitoring. Some of the senior doctors pushed back. She listened, then pushed harder. By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed to implement her changes. A month later, Redwood General's trauma outcomes had improved by 15%. Fewer complications, faster response times, better patient care. The board noticed. Vance called Lena into her office, congratulated her. You're transforming this department. I'm just doing what should have been done years ago. Still, you're making a difference. Lena left the office, walked back to the ER. A new resident was struggling with a chest tube insertion. Lena stepped in, guided her through it. The resident looked up, grateful. Thank you, Dr. Carter. Don't thank me. Just learn. 6 months after her reinstatement, Lena stood in the trauma bay, watching Reeves lead a code. The patient was a middle-aged man, cardiac arrest, no pulse. Reeves moved with confidence, directing the team, calling for meds, performing compressions. After 3 minutes, the monitor beeped. A rhythm. The man gasped. Reeves looked up, met Lena's eyes. Lena nodded. Good work. After the shift, Lena walked out to the parking lot. The sun was setting, the sky streaked with orange and purple. She stood by her car, stared at the hospital. It wasn't perfect. There were still doctors who resented her, staff who questioned her decisions. But it was hers now. She'd earned it, not by being invisible, by refusing to disappear. Her phone buzzed. Pritchard. Saw the latest trauma stats. Impressive. Thanks. You're doing what I always knew you would. Making a difference. Lena pocketed the phone, climbed into her car. She drove through the city, past the lights and traffic, out into the desert. She pulled over at the same overlook she'd visited months ago, got out, stared at the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, vast and indifferent. But she wasn't afraid of it anymore. She thought about Fallujah, about the Marine she'd saved, the soldiers who'd died, about the court-martial, the exile, the decades of running, about Garrison and Caldwell and Wilder and Pritchard, about every patient she'd fought for, every life she'd pulled back from the edge. She thought about the 10-year-old boy with the head trauma, the man Reeves had saved tonight, about all the lives yet to be saved. And she realized something. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. She climbed back into her car, drove home. The apartment was warm, comfortable. She made dinner, ate slowly, savored it. At 10, she lay in bed, stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed one last time. A text from Ethan Reyes. My daughter's school is doing a career day. She wants to tell her class about you. The surgeon who saved her dad's life. Would that be okay? Lena smiled, typed back. More than okay. She set the phone down, closed her eyes. Outside, sirens wailed. Somewhere someone was dying. Somewhere someone was being saved. And tomorrow, she'd be part of that again. Not as a ghost, not as someone hiding from the past, but as Dr. Lena Carter, Director of Trauma Surgery, Captain, U.S. Army Medical Corps, retired. A woman who'd been broken by the system, buried by injustice, and had clawed her way back anyway. She'd lost everything once, her rank, her license, her name, but she'd found something more important in the process. She'd found her purpose, and no one could take that from her again. The city hummed outside her window. The desert breathed in the darkness, and Lena Carter, after 22 years of exile, finally allowed herself to rest. Because she'd done it. She'd survived, she'd fought, and she'd won. Not against enemies, not against the system, but against the part of herself that had believed she didn't deserve a second chance. She deserved it. She'd earned it, and she was never letting it go. Tomorrow, the work would continue. Patients would come. Lives would hang in the balance, and she'd be there, hands steady, mind clear, doing what she'd always done best, saving lives, one patient at a time, one choice at a time, one fight at a time, and that was enough. That was everything.